I never imagined my own son would stand silently while his wife tried to erase me from the home I built. They thought I would eventually hand over the keys and walk away. What they didn't know was that the deed had only one name on it, and it wasn't theirs. I was adjusting the vintage brass lamp on the foyer table when the front door slammed open. My daughter-in-law Chloe marched inside, dropping her dripping raincoat onto the polished hardwood floor. Outside, a steady November rain washed over our quiet street in Ohio. My son Mark trailed behind her, quietly carrying grocery bags and looking down at his mud-stained sneakers. "Why is this heavy antique still sitting here?" Chloe snapped, gesturing to the walnut console table my late husband had spent 2 months restoring. "It makes the entryway look like an estate sale." I paused, carefully wiping the glass lampshade with my cloth. "That table has been in this foyer since 1994, Chloe." "Well, things change," she replied, crossing her arms over her damp cardigan. She turned her eyes toward me, cold and unflinching. "This isn't your family anymore. We run this household now, and your clutter is just taking up valuable space." The sentence hung heavy in the chilly air of the hallway. Mark shifted his weight from one foot to the other, staring intently at the bags in his hands. He did not say a word to defend me, nor did he look up to meet my eyes. I did not raise my voice, cry, or engage in a heated debate. Instead, I carefully folded my cleaning cloth into 4 neat squares. I walked past Chloe without offering to help unload the groceries. I walked upstairs to my master bedroom, pulled out my sturdy oak desk key, and unlocked the top drawer. Inside lay the original deed to this 4-bedroom suburban home, registered solely under my name since the day my husband paid off the mortgage. I picked up the folder, locked the desk, and placed the key deep inside my cardigan pocket. A subtle boundary was drawn right then. The next morning, the smell of burnt toast filled the kitchen. I descended the stairs at 6, following my routine of 40 years. Chloe was already at the island, typing rapidly on her laptop while sipping black coffee. A box of expensive organic cereal sat open next to dirty breakfast dishes from the previous evening. "Mark needs the home office cleared out by Friday," Chloe said without looking up from her screen. "We are converting your sewing nook into his video conferencing room." I poured myself a glass of water from the tap. "That room was part of our agreement when you both moved back from Chicago." Chloe finally closed her laptop screen with a sharp click. "Agreements adapt to reality, Martha. Mark is the primary provider here. He needs space to work, not space for old fabric scraps." I observed her composure. This was not a sudden burst of frustration. It was a deliberate repeating pattern. Over the past 6 months, piece by piece, my personal areas in the house were being reclaimed under the guise of family necessity. Mark had gradually stopped intervening, choosing peace with his wife over fairness to his mother. "Where do you suggest I put my sewing machine?" I asked calmly. "The basement is dry enough," Chloe stated, picking up her coffee mug. "Or you could sell it. It's not like you run a business." I did not argue. I finished my water, rinsed the glass, and placed it in the dishwasher. But instead of packing up my fabrics that afternoon, I drove down to the local hardware store. I purchased a heavy-duty deadbolt lock for my bedroom door. If my shared spaces were being systematically erased, my personal sanctuary would remain entirely untouched. I spent 2 hours installing the hardware myself, testing the key twice before heading downstairs to prepare my own dinner. On Thursday afternoon, Mark knocked gently on my locked bedroom door. When I opened it, he looked uncomfortable, rubbing the back of his neck. "Mom, Chloe tried to move your linen chest to the attic, but the door was locked," he said softly. "Why did you put a deadbolt on your bedroom?" "My room contains my personal property, Mark," I replied, holding the door frame. "I prefer to keep it secure." "It just feels a bit extreme," he muttered, looking past me at the neatly made bed. "Chloe is trying to organize the house. She wants everything to look cohesive for when her parents visit next month." "Organizing is fine, Mark, but respect is different," I said. Since you moved in last year to save money for a down payment, I have stepped back. I stopped cooking communal dinners 3 weeks ago, and I do my own laundry separately now. Mark frowned slightly. Yeah, I noticed. We missed your Sunday pot roast. I am no longer running the domestic operations of this house, I explained evenly. You and Chloe are adults. You can handle your own meals and entertaining. She just thinks you're being distant, Mark argued, stepping back into the hallway. We're supposed to be living as one family unit. A family unit requires mutual consideration, I said, eyeing his hesitant expression. When your wife tells me this isn't my family anymore, I listen. Mark shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my direct gaze. She was just stressed that day, Mom. She didn't mean it literally. Actions speak louder than excuses, I answered softly. Instead of continuing the conversation, I stepped back and closed my door, turning the deadbolt till it clicked. I heard Mark stand outside for a moment before walking down the stairs. The shift in our dynamic was undeniable, and the boundaries were becoming crystal clear. By mid-December, winter had fully set in. Frost covered the lawn, and the furnace ran constantly. While searching through the utility bills in the kitchen cabinet, a task I had always managed, I noticed a thick manila envelope addressed to Mark and Chloe from a local real estate agent. Curious, I opened the envelope. Inside were draft listings for my house, complete with professional staging estimates and projected market values. Attached was a note from the realtor, looking forward to listing your property once the title transfer is finalized. I sat down at the kitchen table, studying the document. Chloe had already contacted an agent to appraise my property, operating under the assumption that I would eventually sign over the house to Mark. They were planning to sell my home to buy a larger estate in the outer suburbs. A few minutes later, Chloe walked into the kitchen wearing her winter coat. She froze when she saw the papers spread out in front of me. You shouldn't be snooping through our mail, Chloe said instantly, her tone defensive. This mail concerns my property, I replied smoothly, pointing to the estimated valuation. Are you planning to put my house on the market? Chloe smoothed her coat collar, attempting to regain control of the room. Mark and I need a bigger yard for our future children. This house is old and requires too much maintenance for you anyway. It's the logical next step for the family. My name is the only name on this title, Chloe, I reminded her. Mark is your only child. She fired back, leaning against the counter. Naturally, this asset belongs to his future. Holding on to it out of sentimentality is selfish. I carefully folded the listing papers and slid them back into the envelope. I did not yell. I merely gathered my car keys and walked out. I spent the afternoon sitting in my car near the lake, watching the gray waves hit the icy shore. The emotional sting of Chloe's entitlement was real, but it did not blind my judgment. My late husband, Thomas, and I had built our life through decades of disciplined budgeting and hard physical work. We had paid off this mortgage while raising Mark, hoping to provide stability for our retirement. I realized then that my leniency had been mistaken for weakness. By allowing Mark and Chloe to live rent-free under the pretext of saving money, I had enabled their arrogance. They viewed my home not as a generous favor, but as an impending inheritance they were entitled to manage. I drove to my attorney's office in downtown Akron. Mr. Vance had managed our family trust for over 20 years. He greeted me warmly and pulled up my file. Martha, it's good to see you, Mr. Vance said, adjusting his glasses. What can I do for you today? I need to review my living trust and property holdings, I stated, sitting down in the leather chair. Specifically, the occupancy permissions for my residence. Of course, Mr. Vance replied, pulling out the official documentation. As the sole trustee and property owner, you have total authority over who resides in the home. I want to draft a formal legal notice, I said quietly. A 90-day notice to vacate prepared strictly according to state tenant laws. Mr. Vance looked up surprised. Are you sure about this? Martha, Mark is your son? He is... I agreed, looking him straight in the eye. And because he is my son, he needs to learn that respect is non-negotiable. Please prepare the document. We spent the next hour finalizing the paperwork. I left the office with a clear mind and a firm resolve. Over the next 2 weeks, I systematically detached my daily routine from theirs. I signed up for a weekly volunteer program at the local botanical gardens, taking me out of the house every morning. I reconnected with old friends, joined a local book club, and began taking my meals outside the home or in my private quarters. Mark noticed the change. One evening, he caught me as I was heading out the front door with my coat on. "Mom, you've been gone almost every day this week," he said, holding a cold takeaway container. "Chloe said you haven't even touched the mail on the hall table." "I handle my mail directly now." "Mark," I replied, checking my gloves, "how are your savings coming along for your house deposit?" Mark shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. "Well, prices are high right now. We were hoping we could stay here another year or two, maybe work out a deal to take over the mortgage." "There is no mortgage, Mark. I paid it off 7 years ago." "Right. But..." "Chloe mentioned we could refinance it under our names to get cash out for a down payment on a second property." I looked at my son, searching his face for any sign of self-awareness. He was simply echoing Chloe's financial ambitions without considering the consequences for his mother. "That will not be happening," I said plainly. "I suggest you look into standard rental apartments in the area. Market rates are rising." Mark laughed nervously, assuming I was joking. "Rent? Why would we pay rent when we have this place?" "Because this place belongs to me," I replied, opening the front door. "And my hospitality has limits." I walked out into the crisp evening air, leaving Mark standing alone in the foyer. By late January, the tension in the house reached a boiling point. Chloe stopped speaking to me entirely, communicating only through slammed doors and loud phone conversations in the living room. She began replacing my framed family photos in the hallway with modern art prints she had purchased online. I did not throw a tantrum or strip her decorations down immediately. Instead, I carefully packed my original photographs into protective storage boxes and placed them safely inside my locked bedroom. On a cold Sunday afternoon, Chloe invited her parents over for lunch. I was making tea in the kitchen when they arrived. Chloe did not introduce me. Instead, she guided them through the ground floor as if she were a tour guide showing off a newly acquired estate. "We are knocking down this wall in the spring," Chloe told her mother, loudly pointing to the load-bearing partition between the kitchen and dining room. "The layout is terribly outdated. Martha just didn't have the eye for modern design." Her mother smiled politely, looking awkwardly in my direction. "Is Martha going to stay during the renovations?" Chloe let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Oh, we're working on alternative arrangements for her. A senior living community down in Canton has great reviews. It's much more suitable for someone her age." I took a sip of my tea, completely unbothered by her performance. Mark was standing near the patio door, pretending to inspect the backyard trees, while ignoring his wife's conversation. I walked over to the kitchen counter, picked up my tea mug, and looked directly at Chloe. "It's interesting how much you've planned for a house you don't own." Chloe's face turned bright red. "Excuse me." "You heard me," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Enjoy your lunch." That evening, after her parents had left, Chloe cornered me in the hallway. Mark stood a few feet behind her, looking exhausted and stressed. "You embarrassed me in front of my family today." Chloe hissed, her fingers clenching into fists. "You have been passive-aggressive ever since we moved in." "I have been polite, quiet, and accommodating in my own home," I replied smoothly. "Your home?" Chloe scoffed, raising her voice. "You're an old woman living off past achievements. Mark and I are the ones building a future here. You're just holding us back because you can't let go of the past." Mark stepped forward slightly. "Chloe, maybe calm down a bit." "No, Mark," she shouted, turning on him. "I am sick of tiptoeing around your mother. She acts like she owns this place." "I do own this place," I stated firmly. Chloe took a step closer to me, her eyes burning with resentment. This isn't your family anymore, my daughter-in-law said as she ordered me out of the hallway. We are the core of this house now. You are just a guest who has overstayed her welcome. It's time for you to pack up and move out. The silence that followed was absolute. Mark stood frozen, refusing to speak, refusing to take a stand. He stared at the floorboards, completely cowardly in the face of his wife's outburst. I looked at Chloe, then turned my eyes to my son. I saw clearly that no amount of gentle patience would ever wake him up. "Wait here," I said, quietly. I walked up the stairs to my locked room. I retrieved the official legal envelope from my desk, along with the certified copy of the house deed. I walked back down the stairs, every step deliberate and calm. I stepped back into the hallway where Chloe and Mark were waiting. Chloe had her arms crossed, looking smug, as if she believed she had finally forced my surrender. I quietly placed the deed on the table and replied, "Then you won't be living in my house." Beside the deed, I laid down the formal legal notice prepared by my attorney. Chloe frowned, looking down at the papers. "What is this?" "That is the official deed to this property, bearing my name alone," I explained in a low, measured voice. "And underneath it is a 90-day formal legal notice to vacate. You have until April 30th to pack your belongings and clear out of my home." Chloe gasped, her face draining of color as she scanned the legal letterhead. "You can't do this. Mark is your son." "Mark is an adult," I said, looking directly at my son. "And Mark permitted you to stand in my home and demand my departure. Since you believe this isn't my family anymore, I am officially separating my assets from your presence." Mark stared at the legal notice in utter disbelief. "Mom, you're evicting us." "I am revoking my hospitality," I corrected him firmly. "I offered you a place to stay so you could save money for your own future. Instead, you attempted to push me out of my own life's work. I will not be disrespectfully managed in a house I paid for with 40 years of honest effort." "This is insane!" Chloe yelled, snatching up the papers. "We have rights. We live here." "You are legal tenants without a lease," I stated calmly. "The notice has been filed with a county clerk. If you are not out by April 30th, the sheriff will assist with the removal." Without another word, I turned and walked upstairs, locking my deadbolt behind me. By the end of March, the atmosphere in the house had completely shifted. Faced with undisputed legal reality, Chloe and Mark were forced to act. They found a modest 2-bedroom rental apartment on the south side of town. The process of moving humbled them significantly. The costs of security deposits, monthly rent, and moving trucks quickly depleted their savings. On their final day, Mark carried the last box out to his car. Chloe sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, refusing to look back at the house. Mark walked up to the front porch, where I was standing holding a fresh cup of tea. He looked tired, his eyes heavy with regret. "Mom," he said softly, handing me his copy of the house keys. "I'm sorry. I should have spoken up much sooner." I took the keys and placed them in my pocket. "I hope you learn to stand up for yourself and your principles, Mark. A real home is built on mutual respect, not takeover." "Can I still call you?" he asked quietly. "You are my son, Mark. My door is open for a relationship with you, but my home will never again be taken for granted." He nodded slowly, embraced me briefly, and walked down the driveway to his car. I watched him drive away until the tail lights disappeared around the corner. I turned around and stepped back into my quiet, peaceful hallway. The house was empty, bright and calm. I unlocked the storage box in my room, retrieved my family photographs, and hung them back up on the foyer walls where they belonged. I sat in my favorite armchair by the window, listening to the gentle rustle of spring leaves outside, entirely in control of my own life.